Welcome into episode 183 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. And the Bruins got their 61st win of the season tonight, beating the Toronto Maple Leafs 2-1 at the TD Garden. David Pastrnak scored his 57th goal of the year finally. I know, the first 3 quarters of last podcast, I thought he already had 57. Sue me. It was 1 goal off, people. I guess the good news for the Bruins in this game is that they really didn't play all that great, in particular, outside of the second period. I mean, outside of the first period. At the last 2 periods they're okay, not great. They also were undermanned. The good news is that they found a way to win yet again for the 61st time. Wasn't all good news during the game. Charlie McAvoy left the second half with an upper body injury. There's more updates on that, so there's no need to panic. But Bridget and Scott, your initial takeaways from the Toronto game.
Yeah, I didn't really think either team really brought their best. And, it's kind of interesting. Like, after the game, the Bruins kind of talked about it as if, like, it had a little bit of a playoff feel. And, they talked about how it was kind of a grind and, wasn't wide open. And, like, that much was true. But it definitely didn't have playoff intensity. At least at times it did. Greer drops the gloves. There were some scrums. Hathaway threw a bunch of hits. But I thought the game was like a little flat through, 40 minutes more or less. And third period was good, and then Bruins went in overtime. But yeah, so yes, the Bruins were undermanned. Obviously, Krejci misses another game. McAvoy gets knocked out basically almost exactly halfway through the game in a collision with Bergeron. Jim Montgomery said after the game that they don't believe it's anything serious. Ruling him out for the rest of the game was more precautionary. Although it does sound like he might sit another game or two just because, why take any chance at all? So even, so Bruins are undermanned. Just for that reason, it's an impressive win. But I didn't think it was Toronto's best game either. I thought they looked a little flat at times. So ultimately, I'm not sure we learned a whole heck of a lot from this game. But, as the Bruins try to build some momentum towards the playoffs and set their sights on this wins record because, hey, it's right there for the taking. Now they only need 1 win in their last 4 to tie it, 2 of their last 4 to get it. And yeah, finding ways to win, even when you're not at your best, even when you're undermanned, like that's a good thing to have. And they have had that all year, and they've especially had it down the stretch where they keep winning games, even if guys are resting, getting games off, rotations, different lines. It doesn't seem to matter. They just keep winning.
Yeah, and you mentioned it wasn't Toronto's best game either. It definitely was not their best game. They got O'Reilly back in the lineup. He'd missed about a month, and he didn't really have much of an impact on the game. Matthews had like 1 or 2 chances that were good, but you're right when you say it was flat. It was kind of honestly a little bit boring for a Bruins-Leafs game, and I'm sure people paid a lot of money to go see those. I mean, those are kind of games that you mark on your calendar. Obviously, this season, no one could predict that, playoffs would already be set for the Bruins, and it wouldn't be a game that was quite as meaningful at the end of the season as maybe in years past. It could have, been of more consequence. But, yeah, I didn't think it had a playoff feel, despite what some of the guys said after the game. For Swayman, I think, at the very least for Swayman, he had a good reason to feel like it was more of a playoff test because obviously it's a team that he could face in the playoffs. He wants to be playing at this time of year against high caliber teams to get himself ready for the playoffs. So I guess I'll throw it to you guys for that. How, what kind of a test was it for Swayman? And he had a good game. So I just want to hear what you guys think of that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a really good game for Swayman. You're right. He was the one who was tested at, probably playoff caliber level. Like, especially the first half of the game, the first 2 periods, the Leafs had some really good chances Point blank, like high danger chances. They had guys who crashed on a couple of rebounds that Swayman had to get reset for. And, obviously he's been playing really well for quite a while now, but yeah, I definitely thought this was a great game for him. He was really on top of it. And, the Bruins, I thought Samsonov made some good saves too. So both goalies were pretty impressive. But yeah, you could easily say like Bruins probably lose that in regulation if it's not for Swayman.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's just an embarrassment of riches for the Bruins in that, you have Linus Ullmark first in the league in goals against average at 1.90, and then obviously Swayman's third. Or not obviously, maybe you don't know that, but he's third for goalies and goals against average at 2.2. Save percentage, Swayman is fourth amongst goalies. Shutouts, he is fourth amongst goalies. So, I mean, he's more than capable if his numbers called in the playoffs. And we've talked about it in the past, and Scott was a proponent of, and I don't, maybe you still are, Scott, actually, it's maybe a good time to circle back on that. But while we're talking about the goaltending, but Scott was a proponent of potentially doing the alternate goalies starts in the playoffs. If they were to do that, you have two guys that are in the top 5 in all categories. So yeah, good showing for him against the Maple Leafs. Definitely had some really point blank saves. One on Marner in the slot. Forgive me if one of you guys mentioned that earlier, but yeah, he was really good. And I'm just really confident in this tandem. If one of them falters, the Bruins, the goaltending is not going to be an issue for the Bruins in the playoffs, in my opinion. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on the goaltending tonight.
Yeah, and Charlie Coyle, when he was asked after the game about Swayman, was talking about how Swayman's kind of an underrated, under the radar kind of guy, especially this time of year when everyone kind of already, I wouldn't say everyone, but I think a majority of people pencil Ullmark in there when he's not necessarily so far ahead of Swayman that it doesn't make sense to keep the rotation, or I don't know. I'm not as usually in the past I would have been saying no, just pick the one, but they're both playing so well that I don't really have an issue if they decide to choose one or go with a rotation. I think either would work. I liked the idea of keeping Swayman active in the playoffs and getting him in there. I think that the dynamic, they're so used to it that it'd be a little bit weird if they went away from it in terms of like a mentality wise.
Yeah, I know it's a losing battle at this point because I don't think they're going to do it, but I still would rotate. Like, I just think both are playing so well. And again, you continue to have just historically great goaltending in terms of how much better they've been than the rest of the league. Like, so I just checked again. My favorite stat to follow this year is the difference between them and both the league average and the second place team. Bruins currently 929 save percentage as a team. Second place is 915, and the league average is 899. Like, it's crazy how much better than everyone else they are in terms of goaltending. And they've gotten that historically great goaltending by rotating goalies for the vast majority of the season. Now, obviously, we did see them, just last week give Ullmark 2 in a row, and that was it was interesting because Montgomery said that he anticipated starting both goalies back-to-back games at some point just to give them that experience. So I wonder if that's still the plan. Like, Swayman hasn't gotten that yet, so I wonder, I don't think he's going to start Saturday. Like, I feel like they're going to give Ullmark New Jersey, but I wonder if maybe they're thinking about that next week at some point. Like, maybe Swayman gets Sunday and Tuesday or something, and then Ullmark gets the last game, so he's not going, almost a full week before game one. Like, I could see something like that, but, or if they want to give Ullmark another back-to-back games, like, they could do that as well. So it's going to be interesting how they handle these last few games. I do think, in the playoffs, it's going to be Ullmark until he either falters or he's just played so many games in a row that they think he needs a game off and they feel like they're in a spot where they can afford to do that. But yeah, I would rotate. Like, I know like it sounds crazy just because no one does it, but in my mind, it just doesn't seem that crazy based on how good they've been.
I don't think it's crazy. I think that they have such a good relationship too that it would be weird for them if one of like, I don't know if guilty would be the right word, but I feel like they like whoever's getting the start might feel bad and feel guilty that, you know, their best friend is just chilling there waiting for them to, you know, make a mistake. And it just seems like not the dynamic they've had this year.
You know, I gotta be honest with you too. I think it's crazy that you two don't think it's crazy to alternate goalies every other game in the playoffs. I
usually would.
Huh?
I said I usually would.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but look, they can both have a 0.0 goals against average all year long. I still think like, and Scott, I think Bridget, I think you may have been away when we had this discussion on one of the episodes, but like, I am all for both goalies playing throughout the playoffs. But the every other game to me, I just feel like while the pros for it are that you're giving teams a different look every other game. You know, you're keeping the opponents on their toes. You're keeping them guessing. You're keeping both goalies sharp. I get all that. I do. But I like if a guy is feeling it, I can't stick him on the bench. I just can't do it. Not in the playoffs. Like not saying to not play both goalies when it feels appropriate, but to force a rotation, in my opinion, it makes me feel uncomfortable. That's the best way I can describe it. So God bless. Everybody has their own opinions on the matter. It's America. But it just makes me feel a little weird. And I just, whatever. So that's my thoughts. I definitely see both goalies playing at one point or another, but maybe I'm in a minority here. Maybe everybody wants to rotate them and live in this happy-go-lucky world. But I really do think like finding a guy who's feeling confident and is studying his opponent's tendencies over a 7-game series. And I think there's some validity to that. And there's a reason why, even when I know not every team in the history of the NHL has had this type of tandem to do it with, I get that, but it makes me feel a little bit strange. So that's how I feel about it.
Brian, the one goalie playoff run is so yesterday.
Yeah, I agree, but that's not what I'm calling for. I know you're not putting words in my mouth. I think there's a happy medium. I think people are, it's either ride one guy or rotate, and I'm over here saying, well, why does it have to be black or white? Like, just feel it out and see how it goes. If you think one guy has a better shot in a given game, then go for it. But I just don't feel like forcing a rotation is, I don't know. It could work. I'm not God. Like, it could absolutely work, but I think it's playing with fire a little bit. Because what happens if you go down like 2-0 and both guys lost the first 2 games? It's just weird. So I don't know.
Yeah, I would say like on the flip side of that, like the one thing that would make me a little uncomfortable is, okay, there's obviously not a big difference between both of them. And so it's easy to sit here and say like, well, if Ullmark struggles, you can just go to Swayman. But I do feel like it can get a little uncomfortable when you try to figure out, okay, well, how much does Ullmark have to struggle for you to go to Swayman? You know, is it one game? And if he's only mediocre in game 1, are you going to Swayman already in game 2? Is it, does he have to lose 2 in a row? And then you're, maybe stuck with them a game too long and now you're down in the series and you've dug yourself a hole. Like, I think when there's a clear number 1 and, clear number 1, clear backup, you give that clear number 1 a lot of leash, right? Like you're going to give them the chance to bounce back. Even if they lose 2 in a row, as long as they haven't been horrible, you're probably sticking with them. I think like the fact that Ullmark and Swayman are so close, in just going back to like December, obviously season-long numbers, Ullmark has the edge, but from December on, like they're almost identical in terms of how good they've been. I do think it can get like a little tricky when you try to get into a situation where it's like, all right, when do we actually make that switch? And, is it gonna, are you gonna like affect Allmark's confidence if then you have to go back to him at some point? Like they're so close that in my, like, not that I'm looking for just the easy way out. Like I advocate for the rotation because I actually just as of right now feel like it would be best. But I also think like it would be easy where you have this set plan going in. You're telling them, hey, we trust what's been working for all season. So this is what we're doing. And I feel like it then gets tough trying to figure out when Allmark's actually going to sit, when you're actually going to make a switch to Swayman. Obviously, it'd be great if Allmark just is awesome all playoffs long and, you never even have to think about it. But at some point, kind of to the point, like what you're talking about, Brian, it's like, okay, well, Swayman will play at some point. But then I think once you get into the nitty gritty of like actually trying to pin down when that's going to be is, in my mind, like the part that can get uncomfortable.
I hear that. Totally get that. Like, I'm gonna let you finish. What did Kanye West say about Taylor Swift? Let me let's play this out for a second, okay? Because again, I think this video game concept of rotating goalies is great. Both goalies are at 99. What can go wrong? But let's say like game 1, the Bruins and Allmark lose 4-0. Okay. Game 2, the Bruins go out and Swayman stands on his head. Bruins tie the series. You are unsure of Allmark's confidence because he lost game 1 and maybe he's doubting himself a little bit. Swayman gets you back into a tied series. But it's a rotation, so let's go back with Allmark. I find that just so ballsy.
I don't see an issue with it. Like I would never think going to Allmark would be a dangerous thing to do. Like if so, or vice versa. It just doesn't seem as risky as, it's just so different than what other teams have dealt with.
I think the best thing for us, maybe we just agree to disagree here because I feel like we could probably go an hour this way. I just think I understand how good both goalies are. I really think there's a human element to it that people just like are totally neglecting because while it worked all season in the regular season, which is totally different than the playoffs, it's totally different than the postseason. It's a different animal. You're getting different teams on different schedules and different cities with like, it's different. And I don't know. I mean, so like Allmark loses game 1, Swayman wins game 2. Allmark loses game 3, Swayman wins game 4. 2-2 series going back to Boston. Allmark's turn.
Well, but then like that's where like I can be talked into switching away from it. Like to me, when I say like I want to start the playoffs with a rotation, it's not I'm automatically sticking to it, not even considering changing at any point. Like, yeah, if one of them is way better through through 4 games and a 2-2 split, like, yeah, like absolutely. Then you just ride the hot hand at that point. So it's, it's not, I want to make it clear, like it's not like a steadfast, hey, we're going to every other game for 2 months, guys, and like nothing's gonna change it. Like I don't care if Swayman's leg falls off, he's still getting the next game. Like
kind of a cop out to me. That's kind of a cop out. We're gonna go with the rotation unless it blows up my face in the first 4 games, and then I'll go back to maybe what Brian suggested earlier on. It's kind of a cop out.
I mean, that's the same as any plan. Like you can say, like we're gonna ride Allmark, and then if he sucks the first 2 games, you're not riding Allmark anymore.
No, but that's not true because I said that I said I would play both goalies in the playoffs. But it would depend on the situation. I did say I'd play both goalies if I needed to. In my opinion, to your question earlier, Scott, you said something. Don't give me that look, Scott. In my opinion,
Brian's Mac and Always Sunny right now. I play both sides, so I'm not wrong.
I'm not playing both sides. I'm against the rotation, but I do concede that both goalies will play at some point. To answer your question earlier, Scott, you were like, well, when would you maybe make that switch? I've said this before to you. If Allmark starts the playoffs and the Bruins go down 2-0, I'm switching the goalies. That's my threshold. If you go down a couple games in the series, change it up, and then ride who's hot from there. That's my opinion. I give Allmark the first 2 games.
Would you have done that in 2011 when Tim Thomas loses the first 2 to Montreal and didn't look very good?
No, but it's a different goalie situation now, which is why I said I'm down to play with both goalies in the playoffs.
I feel bad that I brought up Swayman because I feel like this first 20 minutes has just been an argument about Swayman and all
I wanted Swayman playing over Rask 3 years ago, so I'm consistent with that.
I did as well.
I think we all did. He wasn't healthy, but
we started this podcast talking about how it was a boring game. So
yeah, true.
So what that we got sidetracked? Like I didn't really need to do like a deep dive on what the Bruins bottom 6 did tonight, honestly.
No, but I can't get past something Brian said, which was that Scott's Taylor Swift in his Kanye scenario. So anyway, and by the way, Brian, Scott gave me much worse looks today.
Hey, I mean, who looks better these days, Taylor Swift or Kanye? So
or Scott McLaughlin.
I'll take the Taylor Swift there.
All right. Well, let's see what else do we got here.
By the way, Scott, when's your popcorn brand launching? And Bridget did such a marvelous job with Scott's Pops.
Oh no.
There it is. That's beautiful. That is beautiful. And now I'm glad it's on YouTube too, so people can see it. Scott's Pops.
He hates me for this, Brian. He's still mad at me.
I don't know why. You're gonna be a millionaire. I think that could go.
We literally just helped you launch your brand, and you're like, he was like giving me so much shade throughout the game. Like he wouldn't even talk to me. He said he didn't want to encourage it. I'm like, you can't stop me. I'm gonna just wait till you see what else this goes on. Okay.
Dare I say, Bridget, that Scott should change his Twitter avatar from his current profile picture to Scott's Pops.
This is what it's gonna look like when he calls me every time.
Can you imagine being
on a popcorn?
Imagine being one of Scott's followers that's like looking for his Bruins updates, like McAvoy to the room, sees that Scott's Pops profile picture, or like Marchand goes offside, Scott's Pops picture pops up. So, I think it's great. I think it's genius.
Currently it's him as Santa, so
yeah. So I better behave because I don't want to get cold next year.
That has been my Twitter avatar for at least a decade.
Really?
I
just haven't changed it.
I don't know. This looks like it could be time.
Well, Scott, if it's not your profile picture, I'm going to make it mine. So it's going to be. Okay. Back to the Bruins game. So I did want to bring up one thing in particular, and I'm looking for you guys for some advice on what Brad Marchand can do to get himself going before the postseason. I think it's one of the biggest storylines to follow going into the postseason. I mean, I absolutely think that he can go the next 4 games scoreless, and he is still a threat to break out in the playoffs and, be a point per game guy in the postseason. I have no doubt about that. But with that said, he's got 0 points in his last 5. He has 2 points in his last 8 and 7 points in his last 10. So obviously, clearly, 9 and 10 games ago, he had 5 points combined, but in the last 5 games, 0 points. Again, we've talked about it before, but until he breaks out of it, we have to keep bringing this up. He's part of a power play that's losing momentum for the Bruins, and 5-on-5, he's not doing a whole lot. So I guess what can he do to break out of this before the postseason, or are you just kind of hoping that he just wakes up when April 17th comes around and whenever the round 1 starts?
I mean, one thing that stands out is like shoot more for starters. I thought Thursday night, I actually thought he played pretty well, and I thought there were times he showed some flashes of kind of vintage Marchand, like rising to the moment. He had some nice moves. He had some nice, quick cuts, stop starts, like to shake defenders, and that's one of the things that I feel like you haven't seen enough this season. But then he was doing that, and then it wasn't really like there wasn't a finish there. There wasn't, it wasn't translating to really great scoring chances. And, I just looked it up. Like 4 of his last 5 games, he has two shots on goal or fewer. Thursday night, he had 1. So, if you're talking about being in a goal scoring drought, which is now, what do we say, 14 games? Yeah. Like there's one place to start is just get more pucks on net. Like I know that sounds simple. I'm not saying, throw them on net from 50 feet out or anything, but I do feel like he's been in some positions where like normally you expect him to get a shot off and he doesn't. It's like he's either holding a little too long, looking to pass. There's one tonight where it just like didn't handle. It would have been a pretty good look, and he just didn't handle the pass cleanly. So I don't know. Like, is that him gripping the stick a little too tight? Seeing that, hey, I finally have a good look, and it's in his head a little. Like, I don't know, but that's a really obvious one. Is like he's got to shoot more. 1 or 2 shots a game that's not good enough for him.
Well, one of the most memorable Marchand moments of the night against Toronto was that he had a wide open net to shoot in. He almost was the Bruins, overtime hero, but he got hooked right as he was shooting and ended up being a penalty. The Bruins go on the power play after that. And correct me if I'm wrong, they scored on the power play, right?
Yeah.
No, it's just after.
I think it might have just ended. Yeah.
Okay. So it was 4-on-4. So but yeah, so he draws the penalty, and if they hadn't hooked him, game would, he would have ended it there. I hit a wide open net. I have to think that he wouldn't miss it the way he did, just shooting it all the way straight across the goal line out the other side. So he was so close. And sometimes you get an unfortunate thing like that where the only thing the other team can do is, take a penalty and stop you from scoring. It ended up working for a few minutes, but then obviously Pasternak scoring the overtime game winner. But Marchand was right there on that play, and that was a really good 3-on-3 unit that they had with Grzelcyk, Bergeron, and Marchand. They started out that overtime really quickly, getting some good opportunities, and they looked really good. Almost scored, like I said.
Yeah, I mean, I think this game in particular was really tough. Both teams wanted to get up for it, but end of the day, you have one team that's got the President's Trophy locked up. The other team's locked into their first-round matchup with home ice already locked up, I believe, so against Tampa. So it was tough to manufacture, which may have led to more of a stale game. Now, as far as Marchand goes, and Scott, Bridget, I don't believe you are at Warrior for practices, maybe here and there, but Scott, not recently. Mm-mm. Scott, do you notice anything with Marchand in practice? Like, is his skating still not where it needs to be post hip surgery? Because if that's the root of his problems right now, then that's concerning because it's not going to change anytime soon. But if he's just battling confidence or gripping the stick too tight, those are things that can change on a dime. So I guess. And you don't know the answer to this necessarily, but maybe your best guess.
I think it's probably a little bit of both. Like, I'd be lying if I said anything stood out in practice. I think he's been practicing fine. He looks good when I'm watching. But, he's been open about, he's still not quite where he wants to be. But that he has obviously he sets an extremely high bar for himself. You talk to Montgomery or you talk to Bergeron or DeBrusque or other players about it, and they're like, yeah, I don't know, he looks really good to me most of the time. So it's not like he's dropped down 3 gears. It's maybe a quarter of a gear below where he usually is skating wise. I think some of the kind of what I just mentioned, the quick cuts, the holding defenders off, gaining separation in tight spaces, I think some of that, maybe that little bit of short burst explosiveness, that might be lacking a little bit. But I don't think that's what's causing this slump. I think that's still in a good enough spot that he can produce. We've seen him have much better stretches than this season. I think it's kind of just a slump that has snowballed on him a little bit. And he hasn't been able to break out of it as quickly as we're used to seeing. This is now stretched on to his longest goalless drought in 8 years. He does have, I think, 8 assists during this, so it's not like he's totally off the score sheet until these last few games, and that's where I think it's kind of, like it's almost gotten worse. It's like it got to a certain point where he was like, okay, like, I'm not breaking out of this yet. And now it's almost taken like another downturn instead of bouncing back. And I don't know, like, obviously you would like to see him break out of it before the end of the regular season. And if he doesn't get hooked and he gets that overtime winner, maybe that's the play that does it, right? Like maybe it just takes the one to go in. So that can still happen between now and next Thursday when the regular season ends. I also think like the start of the playoffs could just be kind of the spark and the reset that he needs if it does stretch on that long. Like my expectation is like, I don't think we're going to see peak Brad Marchand from 4 years ago. Like I just think realistically that's probably not showing up this season just because it's been so long. Like it's now been basically an entire regular season that we haven't really seen it. So I'm not expecting that Marchand to magically show up now, but I do think that Marchand is capable of being much better and producing much more than he has the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and this is what I wrote about, and really most of it still stands. I think when I wrote it, it was a 13-game streak without a goal. Now it's 14. But the rest of what I was writing about still stands. And people were like commenting on the tweet and whatnot, like, oh, you're just throwing him under the bus. It's not a slump. Well, it is a slump. Like you gotta call it what it is. It's definitely uncharacteristic of him, but they failed to read the ending, which was that it would also be uncharacteristic of him if he let it affect him in the playoffs, because he's been the Bruins' leading goal scorer 4 playoffs in a row. And he led the Bruins last year in goals, assists, and points through the 7-game series with Carolina with 2 hips that needed surgery. So I feel like he's a different, he has the ability to turn it on in the playoffs. You have to call it what it is. It's a slump. Will it continue? It'd be surprising to me if it continued for an extended part of the playoffs. And when we talk about how it's been 8 years since his last slump, well, that was a 15-game goalless drought. And that happened at the exact same point of the season, starting in March and then going through to he scored in the last 2 games of the regular season, kind of got back on track, went into the playoffs. That was a long time ago. And his longest was 20 games that he went without a goal, which were the entire 20 games of his first season in the NHL a long time ago. So, I want to talk about it because it's important and of note, but he still has 4 games to try to get a goal before the playoffs, and he wants to play through it. He's said that. He doesn't want rest. He doesn't think that would help him as much as playing through it.
Well, far be it from me to explain to a former Stanley Cup champion and potential future Hall of Famer how to play hockey. So I'm not going to be condescending towards Brad Marchand. But from what I see watching, I definitely see a guy who acknowledges the slump that he's in, and he's trying to do too much to get out of it. And in doing so, he's skating into traffic as opposed to away from traffic. He's trying to skate through guys as opposed to, skate around them and get pucks to areas where he can chase after it and use his speed. And the puck's just dying on a stick because it's almost like opponents know he's fighting it, and they're just kind of like really caving in on him really, really fast. And when you're getting caved in on, you're not going to skate through 3 guys with stick handles. It's just not going to happen. Put the puck to an area you can chase after it, use your legs, forecheck, be a pest on the forecheck, which is that's his bread and butter. Always, as talented as Marchand is with the puck on his stick historically, like, he is so effective when he's putting the puck into dangerous areas, chasing after it, forechecking efficiently, finding Bergeron, in the slot or whomever his line mates are. Like, that's what he needs to get back to. Sometimes for star players to get off the schneid of a slump, they have to play more like a grinder. And I think that if he incorporates that into his game down the last couple weeks of the season here, hopefully that he can find some success and some confidence going into the playoffs. And with confidence, it's amazing what you can do with confidence on your side. But when you don't have that, you got to stick to the basics to regain it. And I think that's hopefully what he can do, as Bridget mentioned, in the final 4 games here.
Well, and it's similar thing you could say about the power play. The power play did not look good again today, aside from the overtime power play. But that's obviously you have a lot more space in a 4-on-3. But the regulation power plays did not look good, and it seems like a confidence thing with that too.
Yeah, it for sure. It's for the power play. It's like I was advocating for this check unit to get more time together, and unfortunately for them, like that totally fell apart because Krejci's missed the last 2 games. And to touch on another update from Jim Montgomery after the game, it sounds like it's possible that Krejci misses another game or 2. Like they just want to be super safe and understandably so. But
based on his comments, I feel like it's like more likely than not that he's not playing the next game against New Jersey.
Yeah, I would agree. Like it sounded like both Krejci and McAvoy are gonna sit at least that game, and then possibly Sunday as well, since that's a back-to-back with travel. Like why, if those guys are sitting Saturday, why then throw them on a plane for a 1-day trip? So yeah, it's possible that they both miss 2 games, and that, now that leaves just 2 games after that to try my check power play idea. So I'm sure the Bruins would have loved, they basically reunited like their usual top unit. It was Lindholm, Pastrnak, Bergeron, Marchand, DeBrusque. I'm sure they would love to get that going in this, while they're together again, before Krejci comes back. But it kind of looks a lot of the same. Like they were still struggling to get into the zone, still not moving enough. It's kind of amazing. Like it's just the same thing over and over again with that unit. And again, I come back to like, do they just need, Razors made this point that last year they struggled and then they were good against Carolina in the playoffs. Do they just need like the playoffs to get here so they have more urgency? And, I do kind of wonder about that with guys like Marchand and Bergeron in particular, where it's like, they're not, Pastrnak, while he won't really like admit that like he wants to get 60 goals, but it's like that's a pretty good goal to be shooting for. Other guys, have career highs or approaching career highs. And it's like Marchand and Bergeron aren't that. Like they don't have like any individual numbers or accomplishments or feats to chase right now. So you do kind of wonder, it's like, is it going to take until the playoffs for those guys in particular to really feel the sense of urgency and like kick up the intensity level?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Bergeron has incentives in his contract, but I'm pretty sure they're all really, really low when they were going to be passed really early on in the season.
Yeah. Him and Krejci both already hit them all a long time ago.
Yeah, because they were more of a formality in terms of structuring the contract. But anyway, Krejci not being out, and Pastrnak almost wasn't out there either, because what we heard from Coach after the game was that Pastrnak was dealing with a stomach issue. He told Coach he wanted to play, so he was like, "Well, it's up to him. He's going to play." And when I asked him about it after the game, he said he learned from Bergeron and some of the other guys you can play through anything. So kind of just a hockey player move to play even though you're not feeling 100%.
Yeah, I absolutely do agree with what you guys talked about as well with the power play in the playoffs. I mean, you don't want to rely on that, but I do think that there's an element of just the buzz in the arena when a power play happens, knowing in a playoff game, in a playoff series, how important and special teams is, and just when you're in a 1-1 tight checking game and you get a power play in the middle of the third period and these don't come around too often in this game. And you want to when the stakes are higher, these guys are all world players. They seem to rise to the occasion. And I guess the silver lining is like if the Bruins power play was clicking at like an absurd rate right now, maybe the fear would be, well, maybe they've been too good and they might go cold in the playoffs. Like, so there's always like the grass is always greener. You can always look at things from different perspectives. And from a personnel perspective, yeah, sure, they got to figure out what they want the units to be when they're fully healthy. Hopefully Taylor Hall comes back soon, gives them a different look. All I know is that there's just way too much talent for this team to, I know they were 4 of 14, I think, or 4 of 10, their last 10 going into tonight's game. Obviously, primarily that was the other unit with Zaka and Bertuzzi and stuff like that. So, but yeah, tonight was frustrating. Again, the puck's dying on Marchand's stick. You're losing momentum. You can't even get the crowd into it. They're not shooting it. Not to sound like the guy in the 300s yelling to shoot, but like just shoot it at some point now. And even in overtime, Bridget, you mentioned the overtime power play. See, I thought that overtime power play wasn't great. I thought that, Marchand, DeBrus got a chance in front of the net, but it wasn't by design. It was kind of just like a fluky puck went out to the crease. And then I thought that like I thought Lindholm and Marchand were just playing pass together for like an absurd amount of time on a 4-on-3. It's like, guys, get closer to the net and like find an attacking lane. Like, what are you doing? Just, what are you doing? You look like a bunch of high school kids in warm-ups. Like attack the net.
Yeah, and then before the winner, like the one-timer that they set up for Pasternak, Lindholm was already shaded to that side of the ice. It was like a 8-foot pass, and it was like the goalie's not moving. Like the goalie was already on that side of the net tracking Lindholm, and now you just passed it further off to the side. Like any goalie is going to get completely square to that shot with no problem. It would have taken a like miracle fitted into like a 6-inch by 6-inch hole for Pasternak to score there. Like there's absolutely nothing to shoot at. And it's like, yeah, 4-on-3. Like you shouldn't be settling for an outside one-timer where the goalie's not even on the move.
Yeah, I just feel like they're playing on their heels rather than on their toes in the power play, and it's just very evident. Like they just don't. There's no scoring threat, and I don't know. They got to figure it out. Is it confidence? I don't know. Is it because they've just been playing a little bit subconsciously, going through the motions, knowing that everything is that? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's too passive. It's too nonchalant. They're not creating 2-on-1s in the ozone. Like there's not enough movement, not enough shots to the net, not enough traffic. I mean, literally everything you want in a power play, there's not enough of it. Certainly not enough conviction, and there's no confidence in their game, and it's very evident. Now, yes, they did score following the power play, seconds after Riley got out of the box. But even that, like you watch Pasternak, and he's telling Coyle to pass it to Lindholm. I believe it was Lindholm, and Coyle passed it to Pasternak instead. Pasternak didn't want the puck. Now, it was Orlov, but fortunately, Orlov gave it back to Pasternak quickly for the goal. But it's just, I don't know. The power play was a problem again, and if you're not going to score on it, worse things in life will happen. But do not lose momentum, and especially at home when you have a building that's ready to erupt at any moment for you in the postseason. Don't let the building be flat because you can't get your shit together in the power play when you have an extra guy out there. So, I don't know. There's my TED Talk on that for now.
Brian's got all the rants tonight.
I was a little feisty.
You're feisty today.
I'm a little feisty. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys.
We gotta switch gears as it's running late. It's very late. But we did want to talk about one last thing, which was what Scott's working on for an article tomorrow, I believe.
Maybe
potentially, or we'll talk about it here a little bit. Maybe Scott's going to write about it. Well, it's just because the Bruins' first round opponent, it's not locked in, and it's kind of been changing and moving. And there's just there's a potential for it to be Pittsburgh, the Islanders, Florida. I saw Brian tweet today that Florida might be the team the Bruins want to avoid in the playoffs. That might not. That's a team that has a little bit of extra fight and, you know, some grittier players. But yeah, if you want to touch on that first, Scott, just thoughts on with 4 games left in the season for the Bruins, what they're looking at for the playoffs.
Yeah, well, it's especially interesting tonight because all 3 of those teams had pretty impressive wins Thursday night. Florida, who's been scoring a lot lately, beats Ottawa 7-2. Islanders, impressive 6-1 win over Tampa. And Pittsburgh, 4-1 win over Minnesota. And Minnesota's been playing really well. So, you know, Pittsburgh seems to alternate good and bad games. So, I don't, you know, if they can't string together a few wins here in the last 4, like, I don't think alternating wins is going to be good enough because Islanders and Panthers especially have just been playing better than that.
They're on a 5-game win streak, and now they're in the 7th spot, the top wild card spot, and the Islanders have dropped out of that. So they've jumped both of those teams recently.
Yeah, because right now they have the regulation wins tiebreaker, which is another problem for Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh has no chance of catching either team in the regulation wins. So, I mean, I think Pittsburgh would be the easiest matchup. I think that much is pretty clear. Not that I'm saying like they would definitely be a pushover, but they have even as great as Crosby, Malkin, Letang all still are, like they have the least amount of stuff that worries you. They have very shaky goaltending, shaky team defense, not great depth. So, I still feel like, and I think Brian disagrees here, but I still feel like I don't fear any of them, but the one that would concern me the most, I still think it's the Islanders just because of Ilya Sorokin. I just think he's clearly the best goalie on any of those teams. And to me, any recipe for any of those teams potentially upsetting the Bruins in the first round would have to include great goaltending. And I think the Islanders are the team that would be most likely to have that. So, but there's no doubt that Florida's playing really well right now.
Yeah, I think I agree with Brian. I think Florida is a team that just because of where they're peaking is at the time of year that you kind of want to see your team getting these wins. Like I mentioned, on a 5-game win streak, they would need to come in after the Islanders or Pittsburgh, but not both, in order for the Bruins to play them. So they'd have to finish in that 8th spot. I feel like Tkachuk is a guy you just generally don't want to play against in the playoffs. I think he's one of those agitators who could either hurt your guys or draw a penalty for some sort of retaliation. Some other players on that team as well. My mind has changed to it being Florida that would be the harder matchup of the 3 for the Bruins. And it's going to be something that comes down to the last day because the Islanders and Florida are tied with 89 points, and then right behind them, Pittsburgh has 88 points. So we're really, really close going down to it.
Bridget, I'm giving you the Voldemort hug to Draco Malfoy in the 7th movie. Welcome to the dark side.
I was already here, Brian. I was always here.
I mean, look, I totally appreciate and understand where Scott's coming from with how important goaltending is, and goaltending can absolutely steal a series. So I don't want to discount why he thinks the Islanders would be a great challenge for the Bruins. But I just think that the Bruins lost to the Islanders in 6 games a couple of years ago. I think that series could have gone Boston's way. I mean, people forget. Mm-hmm. The puck hopped over Lozon's stick in Game 5, and the Islanders won in overtime. And the Bruins also they are so much better than they were that year. It really is, like, on paper.
And the Islanders are worse.
The Islanders are worse. The Bruins, I mean, the depth that the Bruins have right now is the talent and the depth that the Bruins have right now is unmatched. completely unmatched. You can tell me anybody, Colorado. I don't care. It's unmatched this year. And the Islanders aren't as good as they were a couple years ago. I actually didn't. I feared the Barry Trotz effect. Barry Trotz is a very, very defensive sound coach. I think the Islanders are still defensively sound, but Barry Trotz was a very, very, very good coach. He deserved better on the island. But if you look at their roster outside of the goal, like Florida's is better. It's more dangerous. There's more high end talent. I mean, there's some. The Islanders have some good little players, but I mean, it's nothing to really fear outside of the netminder, in my opinion. But you go to the Florida Panthers, and I guess what I'm about to say stands true for the Islanders as well. So take it with a grain of salt. But I really do feel that while the Bruins have unmatched depth and talent on their roster, especially compared to these wildcard teams, there's something about playing a team that has been fighting for their playoff lives pretty much all season, and certainly in the second half of the season. And every single game that they're in, they're mentally engaged, they're physically engaged. They're realizing that they have the talent to be a lot better than what they were most of the season. I'm going to give myself a stick tap for bringing up the Keith Tkachuk comments last time we spoke about the Panthers, because they've used it as a rallying cry. His son, Matthew Tkachuk, who Bridget just mentioned, was on a podcast and talked about how that lit a fire in their room, and that his father should get an award for not GM of the year, but front off. I don't know what he said. It was something funny, but the Panthers definitely, I feel like, with Radko Gudas on the back end and Matthew Tkachuk up front, there's a physical element right there. Ryan Lomberg, I think his name is. There's guys that run around on the Panthers, but they also have Alexander Barkov and Aaron Ekblad, and Bobrovsky is a pretty good goaltender as well. I know he's inconsistent, but there's a lot there. I just don't want to play that in the first round if I don't have to. I absolutely could see the Panthers really getting up for a series against Boston. Obviously, every team's going to get up for the playoffs, but if you were to tell me that the Florida Panthers roster upset the Boston Bruins roster, I would much more believe that over the Islanders roster upsetting the Bruins roster. So I don't want to play Florida. I'm not saying I'm afraid of them, but if you're asking me the war of attrition factor, I think that I don't want to play Matthew Tkachuk for 7 games. I don't need him jersey jabbing, Pasternak and McAvoy. Not that the Bruins don't have the guys to counter that and tell them to cut the shit. I'm just saying I don't need to see that for 7 games. It'd be fun to watch. Don't get me wrong. As a hockey fan, it'd be fun. As a Bruins fan who doesn't want to see guys get hurt if they don't have to, then I'd rather skip that team if I could.
Yeah, I do think the Panthers have more of the element of they could do some damage in the sense of injuries, and not even necessarily cheap shots, but just being physical. I really have a hard time seeing the Panthers winning a series against the Bruins, though.
Agree. We're gonna have to agree to disagree here again. We need a Venn diagram, because I sided with Brian on this. I sided with you on the goal.
I still look at that Panthers roster. I'm yeah, there's some good pieces there. There's still some holdovers from the team that won the President's Trophy last year, and then that team ran into a much more complete, deeper team in the Lightning and got swept. And I look at that and I'm is this Panthers team better than last year's? I don't think so. It looks a little different, but I don't think they're a better roster overall. And I just look at the Bruins and I think they're so much better. They're so much deeper. They're so much more well-rounded. I trust their goaltending more. I really struggle to see a way that the Panthers could actually win a series. Whereas with the Islanders, I also don't think they would win a series against the Bruins, but I can at least see the blueprint. I can see Sorokin standing on his head. I can see those defensemen making it hard to score. They still have Pelech and Pollock and Mayfield and Dobson, and the kid Alexander Romanov, I think, is a pretty good player. There's still guys there that they're big, they're mobile, they can make it hard to score even if they don't have that Barry Trotz factor. So I can see that blueprint a little bit easier. Again, I'm not super worried about either team. I think the Bruins should roll in 4 or 5, 6 at most. I don't see any of those going 7 games. But yeah, I'm still kind of on the boat of like keep me away from the only goaltender who actually has a case to be in the Vezina conversation with Ullmark. Like, I would rather stay away from him.
Yeah, the only problem is the Islanders can't win games 0-0. So when you can't score, that Sorokin would he would literally have to pitch probably a shutout or give up a goal a game on average because the Islanders
and then maybe score one like Ullmark.
Maybe. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think we all agree. I think it's a matter of just like, and this is going to sound like a spoiled, pompous, arrogant Bruins fan, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but it's more about like, okay, what opponent can help you lick your wounds quicker getting into round 2 than the other one? Because I think they're going to get by whoever's in front of them in round 1. It's just a matter of what kind of style do you want to see the Bruins play in round 1, and I think Scott, you raised some great points. I definitely I understand all of them. I agree with them too. I just think Florida's roster might not be as good as it was last year, but sometimes it's not as black and white as like, well, they're better on paper last year. Do they have more intangibles this year? Are they tougher? Have they learned their lessons? Like, I don't know. I guess we'll find out. So Bridget, Panthers, Brian, Panthers, Scott, you suck. All right, what's the next topic we're talking about here?
By the way, just one last thing on the Panthers, and also so I can get that off the screen. So people like with Matthew Tkachuk, you hear a lot like he's a playoff style player. I would just point out he has not been good in the playoffs in his career. He has 15 points, 7 goals in 27 career playoff games, which is like his regular season rates of scoring. And I realize 27 games isn't, a huge sample size, but he's had some tough playoff series. So I don't know, maybe feel like, hey, that gives him, something to prove. He wants to shake that or whatever. But yeah, like you would think his style would translate better than it has.
Well, he can still be impactful without scoring in the playoffs. So like his style still can be impactful without, necessarily it showing up there on the score sheet as much as his numbers were in the regular season. I am tired.
But the Panthers,
Scott.
The Panthers would need him to score. We're talking about beating the Bruins.
But we're not though. Like I don't think like the point of this conversation isn't about who's going to be. I mean, I guess you could say who scares you most. I don't think any of us think that the Bruins are in jeopardy against any of these teams.
I think here are 2 things we all agree on: that the Bruins, with the goalie thing, both goalies being healthy, is the only reason why we're having this debate about rotation or whatever. That's a win. Both your goalies are healthy and can play at such a high level that you'd consider playing them in the playoffs. And it's kind of semantics what we're talking about with playoff opponents, because we all agree that those 3 teams, Pittsburgh, Islanders, and Florida, are all teams that they should and could and more than likely will beat in a first round series. So we agree on that.
We do.
Can we end on that?
Yeah. The last thing I would say is for Bruins fans listening and watching is that Saturday night the Bruins have a chance to tie Montreal, Tampa, and the mid-90s Red Wings for the NHL record for wins in the season, 62. Of course, we'll have a couple of chances to tie that if they don't get it Saturday night, and also eclipse that. So
and they could do it in Montreal. They could pass it in Montreal last game of the season.
Yeah, my money's on them passing it before then, but true. That's true.
But they could pass the points record in Montreal though, because that one's a little further off. I think they're 6, 5 from tying, 6 from breaking that now. So
okay. So yes, I mean you won't be listening to us until after that Saturday night game. So if you didn't know, now you know. And we got.
I think we probably won't be recording till Sunday. Would be my guess.
Bridget will be driving home from Montreal at some point on Sunday.
You going to Montreal?
Yes, I am.
No, you're going next week, right? I thought. You're on for the game.
Yeah, you said Montreal.
I think
Now
he
I'm
meant.
confused.
I think he meant New Jersey. I think he meant to say New Jersey.
Oh, okay, you said Montreal. Anyway, I'll be in
All right.
Montreal.
All right. Well, let's let Bridget out of here, get her beauty sleep. You gotta get your beauty sleep too, Scott. I'm not want to discount that. You don't just wake up like this. So thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you soon.